This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast, a part of the Atheist United Studios podcast network. Welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast. My name is David, and I am trying to be the Graceful Atheist. As always, thank you to my patrons. If you too would like an ad-free experience of the podcast, please become a patron at any level at patreon.com/gracefulatheist. I wanted to highlight our blog. Jimmy and Arlene from the community have been participating in writing on the blog, and I'm just really excited about the work that they are doing. Please check out the blog at gracefulatheist.com/blog. If you are questioning, doubting, deconstructing, or deconverting, you don't have to do it alone. Please join us at the Deconversion Anonymous Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/deconversion. Special thanks to Mike T for editing today's show. On to today's show. Arlene interviews today's guest, Stacie. She goes by the moniker Apostacie, which I think is just amazing. You can find her on Instagram at Apostacie. And she is the co-host of Skeptic Haven on YouTube. We'll, of course, have links in the show notes. Stacie's story is amazing. She began in a more Pentecostal, charismatic environment, Word of Faith. She eventually went to more Reformed churches. Her and her husband and her family were excommunicated multiple times, apparently. She talks about hell anxiety, fear of literal demons and angels, and then going through a really investigatory time frame where she was searching for the truth. She saw a documentary from the Reformed perspective against the charismatic movement. She saw documentaries about multi-level marketing as cults. But it was ultimately the response to COVID within the Christian community and deconstructing her belief in the devil and hell itself that led to her deconstruction and deconversion. Here is Arlene interviewing Stacie.
Hi, Stacie. Welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Now, you have a fantastic Instagram presence, and a friend sent me your information, was like, you need to check her out. And I love it. I have not just learned a lot, but laughed, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing. Usually we begin with just tell us about the religious environment that you grew up in.
Sure. So my name is Stacie, and well, first of all, I live in Canada. So I'm in the west coast of Canada near Vancouver, just for context of location. And I grew up mainly in a charismatic environment, Pentecostal, Word of Faith. So very much believing in the supernatural, the healing, speaking in tongues, prophesying. If you were to see kind of the pastors and preachers on television that pray for people and they're being slain in the spirit, that's sort of the environment that I grew up in. It was very much quote unquote normal for church services in my formative years and throughout my teenagehood. So very much, spiritual warfare was a huge part of that as well. So not something that I recommend for people, but that's what I thought was normal for Christianity and believing in God.
I was part of the Calvinist part of Christianity, so we totally judged you guys.
Oh, totally. Well, it's interesting because I don't know if you know this about me, but later, actually, that's super interesting that you are out of Calvinism, because I would love to hear your story later on. But when I was leaving Christianity, that is kind of the stepping stone. That was
Really?
That is what I left. That was my way out of Christianity, is I dabbled in Calvinism.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So about in 2019, I came across a documentary called American Gospel. I don't know if you're familiar with
I have
that
not
at
seen
all.
it.
Oh, okay. Well, it is a documentary that is a Christian documentary,
Okay.
but it is from a Reformed perspective, kind of exposing the charismatic word of faith theology.
Okay.
And when I saw that documentary in 2019, that is, I feel like that's where my deconstruction sort of began.
Hmm.
Um, I felt like my world had been turned upside down because I thought everything that I had grown up believing about God and Christianity and Jesus, I felt this was all a lie because
Mm.
it exposed speaking in tongues and just how ridiculous it was and how it's not biblical and how it gave scripture backing up how that was only meant for that time period. And so I leaned into that reformed perspective quite heavily, and I thought, well, if I've had Christianity wrong, I need to figure out the right kind of Christianity. So um, I went into kind of the Calvinism side, and I thought, well, this is the closest to the Bible, so I wanted to be correct in my theology. And so I thought, well, I didn't think Christianity was wrong at that point. So I found a Reformed church and I started listening to a lot of Reformed preachers and reading a lot of Reformed books and um, getting involved into that side. And I feel like I just went from one culty Christianity to another culty Christianity. And that is the last bit of church experience that I had. And yeah, it's interesting that you have that background because I don't have a ton of experience in it. I can't really speak from a Calvinist perspective a lot because I don't have a ton of knowledge on it, but that is the last church that we were a part of. And yeah, they are bizarre. They
That's
are very much legalistic. What I was always told about. So you were told that we were probably bizarre in our own way of being heavily into the Holy Spirit and like wacky, probably. But I was told growing up, oh, they don't have the Holy Spirit. They're dry. They're legalistic.
but you guys are right. That was absolutely
Yeah. So
yeah.
there's a bit of it's so weird how it's just everyone's kind of pointing fingers like, you don't have it right. You don't have it right. And it just, yeah, I fell right back into that. Like, oh, okay, well, no, the charismatic people aren't right. Now I'm right. So, it's so there's just so much to it. But um, the church that we left, that was the first time I ever experienced becoming a member of a church formally,
Oh, wow.
and yeah, and then being called out with church discipline,
Yep.
and
That's definitely a thing in the
that is
reformed world.
a thing. And so when we left and yeah, we got excommunicated and publicly called out many times uh, over last year 2021,
Mm.
and over their live stream on YouTube, and not just us but our children's names too, not them calling out our kids but basically naming our children because of our quote unquote sin. So that was harsh, but yeah, anyways.
So you grew up charismatic. Did it work for you in your teens and 20s? Like, was life like it was all working fine or?
Well, I mean, I guess that's all I was used to.
Oh,
That was all I was used to.
okay.
So, um, I don't I didn't think there was any other
Mhm.
way of I basically I didn't think I had a choice of not being a Christian because that's how I was raised. I it was this is the truth. Um, why would I not serve Jesus? I felt like people who didn't were just either blind, they didn't have their eyes open to it, or they were just ignorant. And I
Mm.
felt sorry for them. So um, I just didn't see any other way to live. And yeah, I wouldn't have ever chosen not to, because I fully believed what I was living was the truth. I wouldn't have committed to it for so long if I didn't believe what I was doing was right. Um, so yeah, even though it was not um, easy, because it brought on a lot of, now I'm looking back and I can see all the anxiety from the time I was a young child, especially with um, like the spiritual warfare aspect, with always believing that there were um, supernatural forces, whether it be demons or angels. Um, that causes a lot of terror to a small child.
Children up to a certain age, they don't know the difference between real and pretend.
No, exactly.
And then when things we teach them, and we were guilty of it when our kids were little, we were reformed, but
Hmm.
we liked Hillsong music. We didn't literally go to his church, but like listen to Mark Driscoll's preaching, and he had
Oh,
spiritual warfare stuff. And
okay.
and so we did believe that there were invisible forces doing things.
Of
And
course.
we were teaching our kids that because that was what we were convinced was true. Looking back, I do not have any I didn't grow up in the church. I became a
Okay.
Christian in college.
Okay.
So I am very thankful now that that
Yeah.
wasn't. Yeah. But looking back, I did not have any experiences that I can't now just explain by my brain thinking that these things are true. And since I believed that they were true, I saw things through that lens. Like, do you have experiences having grown up in the charismatic church? Do you have experiences that now you look back and you're like, how would you define them or explain them now from when you were younger?
Yeah, there were times where, see, I was told by, I had a lot of stories of me being a toddler, seeing
Mm.
things in the spirit realm. I don't remember those things, but it's interesting because I have a lot of memories from that age. Um, like, I have a really good memory from the time I was 1 and 2 and 3 years
Oh,
old.
wow.
But all these stories that happened at that age, I don't remember them taking place. So I don't know if they were just sort of fed to me like, "Oh, did you see this? Oh, is that what," like, I don't know if that's true, but I just grew up always thinking, "Oh, I used to see in the spirit realm as a toddler." Um, and it was mostly my grandmother who kind of influenced that those stories. Um, and then as I grew up, having a lot of anxiety, um, sometimes she would be the person that I would go and ask, please, can you pray with me? I'm just feeling a lot like just not right. I think I'm being attacked by Satan. I anxiety was not the word that I would have used back then. Always, this is an attack because I'm such a strong Christian. The devil knows that he needs to take me down.
Yeah.
I tell this story somewhat often because I think it really gives a picture of sort of the mind frame that I had. But um, I remember sleeping over at her house when I was in grade 8, so I was probably 13 or 14, and I just said, "Can you please pray with me? Because I just feel really oppressed." So that was the word, and she said, "Sure, I can pray with you." So she did, and um, after she was done praying for Satan and his demons to leave me alone, she basically said, "Okay, but just remember, now that he's he's left you alone, if you let him come back to bother you, he's going to bring back 7 times the amount of demons."
I remember the story that
Yeah.
this idea comes from.
Yes, right from the
Yeah.
Bible,
Yeah.
where
Sweep your house clean and
yeah,
then yeah, that's right.
yeah. And
Wow.
I was like, oh, great. Okay. So I felt a lot of pressure to make sure I wasn't opening any doors to the enemy. So I'm, if anyone is a former Christian, they'll recognize these little catchphrases and
Mhm.
buzz phrases. But so here I am at 13, and um, I thought, okay, well, I didn't really do anything that was wrong. I knew what Christians considered doors that would open to the devil, or give him a foothold, which would be right. I'm
All the
sorry,
words, you just
all the
know.
words. I don't know how to say them not in Christianese, but
Yes, I understand.
yeah. And so, um, I didn't read my horoscope. Even if I had like a 17 magazine, I would
Mhm.
rip that page out because I didn't even want it in my house. Um, I I wouldn't. I would really censor the movies or TV shows if they were doing a scene on television where, say, the teenagers came across a Ouija board. I would shut that scene off because I didn't even want that to be something that would open the door, and they could come through my television screen, right? So I was very, very careful about what I watched. And so when anxiety came back, because anxiety always does, it wasn't the devil or his demons. I was petrified. Great. Now I let them back. What did I do wrong? And now they're going to come back, and it's going to be 7 times stronger. So I was terrified,
Yeah,
and
and
I
that
felt
makes your anxiety worse because
absolutely,
so it feels like 7 more came because now it's
because you're
bigger.
just freaking out.
Mhm.
And then you have that guilt of, what did I do?
Yes.
What door did I open?
Yeah, it has to be your fault. So then you have, more anxiety because now you're trying to figure out like, "Oh,
Exactly.
yes,
See,
Stacie, yes."
I had a lot of, just my mind was always racing, my mind was always going, and that continued up. I mean, I now I'm on anxiety medication because,
Imagine that.
hey,
Mhm.
it's good
Yes.
for you. It helps, right? But even just leaving that environment helped tremendous. I'd say 80% of my anxiety just left from leaving that environment and leaving that way of thinking and deconstructing
Mm.
spiritual warfare, and just realizing that's not a thing. And um, I began deconstructing that without even realizing that was what I was doing when I came across that documentary. Um, and so when I watched that in 2019, um, I it answered a lot of questions that I had about the Bible and about Christianity that I had been raised in. And I promised myself then that I would never not allow myself to find answers to questions that I had, because even though it was a Christian documentary, it answered a ton of questions about the craziness of the charismatic
Mhm.
um, and Pentecostal faith, right? And so I started doing major deep dives into that and finding out, well, when did speaking in tongues become part of the church again? And when did this happen? And when did, like, the Four Square Church become the Four Square Church? And I started really investigating all these things. And now I'm like, okay, that is kind of like a deconstruction of finding out the roots of all of these things. Um, I also believed in the rapture my whole life and had the kind of fear of, you know, when is Jesus going to come back? Even though I had a bit of an excitement towards that, there's still a lot of anxiety, especially when world events start taking place. And, people who kind of subscribe to that mindset, they are always looking at the news, and anytime there's a war or a rumor of war, they're like, "This is it," and I've heard that for my entire
Your
life.
whole life, yeah.
Yeah, and so that was sort of the next thing that I deconstructed without realizing it, and I thought, "Okay, I don't think I believe in that anymore." And I was still a Christian. I was more reformed, but I was like, no, I don't think that I believe in the rapture. I don't think this is something that's going to take place, or at least a pre tribulation rapture, which means, if anyone doesn't know what that is, it's Jesus comes back, collects the true church, and then there's going to be like a 7 years of absolute chaos, and basically hell is broken loose on earth, and it's survival of the fittest, so to speak. Um, so I stopped believing in that, and found out where that kind of theology came from, and like, okay, well, I feel better. So
Yes.
um, I really made myself that promise. If I have questions, I'm going to find out the answer to them. And so it just kind of naturally progressed from there. And it was in the summer of 2021 where um, we moved away from uh, our our family, our church, our whole circle. We moved 4 hours away, and once we moved, I was kind of free in my head. I wasn't surrounded by all of the propaganda, I guess.
Yes,
I
yes.
had myself very well insulated um, by everything Christian.
Yeah.
And when we moved, it was like, oh, I can sort of listen to these podcasts, or like when we were living in where we lived before, I was this like very Christian woman, and I spent all day listening to sermons. So all day, that's all that I had on. And so, like you start to have doubts. So it's like, feed your faith, and
Yep.
that's what you would do. And so, but when we moved, I was kind of like, I don't want to do that. I want to listen to other things. I want to start kind of exploring just it wasn't even like I was looking to, like, deconstruct my faith. That wasn't even it. It was just sort of like, "Oh, this podcast is kinda interesting," and then it kinda got me thinking, "Oh, well, that actually makes a lot of sense," and another one would sort of get suggested or recommended, and it kinda went from there, and it wasn't even anything really to do with Christianity. I was really interested in, like, well, kinda cults, and not just like religious cults, but even like multi-level marketing cults and
Yes.
political cults. And
Mhm.
so I was listening to a lot of those podcasts and sort of seeing the similarities between those and religion. And that's when the wheels really began to turn. I also was seeing a lot of just the Christian response to COVID, and um, that was also a huge eye opener to me. And it all just kind of went from there. It was not really like one specific moment, but I just say it was the fall of 2021 where it all just popped open like a can of worms. And um, it was exciting at the same time. Like, because I had gone through times in the past where I would have major, major doubts and just think, this is all ridiculous, but I would keep it inside. I wouldn't say anything to anyone, and I knew how to kinda get through it, um, and come out on the other side without losing my faith. And one of the ways was, it's like I would just kinda think my way in a circle, and I'd be like, "Well, this doesn't seem true, and this just sounds ridiculous," and but then I'd come back around and think, "But when it comes down to it, I believe that there is a devil," because I was so afraid.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, well, I'm afraid of going to hell. I'm afraid of the devil. I can't believe in a devil and not believe in God. So I'm just back at square one. Okay, I yeah, I have to just believe in God then.
And you have to stop. It's like, "Okay,
Yeah,
I can't
exactly.
go farther." Mhm.
That's exactly it. So I would kind of like take the next step in my brain, take
Mhm.
the next step, and then be like, but if I believe there's a devil, and I believe that more sometimes,
Mm.
and the fear of that, and that would just stop me dead in my tracks, and then I'd be like, "Okay, well, I give up. Yeah, okay, I can't believe in the devil and not believe in God." So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, and so, um, I really, in order to go any further in my questioning of things and my search and my doubts, I thought, if I'm going to do this, I have to know I'm not going to go to hell for this. And I know a lot of people, that's sort of the last thing that they get rid of. For me, it had to be the first thing.
Mhm.
And so um, I I talked to my husband, and I just asked him. I was like, I'm just so nervous about um, finding out certain answers to questions, because what if I'm sinning and I commit the unpardonable sin, and then that's it, I'm doomed, I'm gonna go to hell.
Wow, yes.
And he never, like, everyone always asks me, well, what did your husband feel, what's his belief system? So he was a very supportive husband who had a he always thought it would be great if there was a heaven, and he would love to go if it existed, but he has a very analytical,
Mhm.
scientific mind that just, he's like, there's not enough proof for me, but he was very supportive in my faith.
So was he not a believer while you guys were married, or
He I think he was just really good at being supportive and all of that, but he just was like, no, this is not. But I didn't really know, because he never really, like, he didn't challenge me on anything. He just he's amazing. So,
That's awesome.
when I would go to him and at this time, he just offered me these little, like, pieces of encouragement or advice. He never, like, nudged me or was like, "Yeah, do this. Go for it." Like, "Stop believing." He was just like, just use caution. Don't go overboard, because this was my whole identity. He didn't want me to, like, lose my faith and then spiral and be like, "Well, now what?" You know?
It can go really badly really quickly because it's a scary thing, especially if this is, like you said, this has been your identity for your entire life. And we're fed the idea that, like, without Jesus or without God, we have no purpose, we have no meaning, everything, you're nothing to be thankful for, everything falls apart. It doesn't. That's all just
No.
a lie. They have to sell you that idea so you'll stay because it's kind of just boring. Well, I come out of Calvinism. We were boring. You guys were not boring. I am curious. I'd like to go back. How did you go from listening to sermons, super godly woman, to watching that documentary? Oh, but you said it was a Christian
It
documentary.
was a Christian documentary.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
You weren't necessarily asking questions or anything. You just happened, you watched it and then you started asking questions.
Part of watching that documentary was, I was a huge Hillsong listener as
Yes, us
well,
too.
and I was, really big on, like, the emotional music and all of that, but I was like, I really wanted to get to, like, the heart of, like, God and
Mm,
theology, and, like, I was starting to really think, "Okay, these people sound like they're worshiping themselves, and that's
hmm.
not what I'm here for." So, I started to just really look into their music, and excuse me, not just them, but also, like, Bethel and Elevation and all of those really big, big Christian names, right? And I was just like, these people are just, they're in it more for themselves. They're not in it to bring people to know the gospel, and so I came from it from that perspective. Um, yeah, so I stopped listening to all Christian music in general, because
Oh,
I
wow.
was listening to all the lyrics and I was like, "No, I sound like I'm singing about myself more than I'm singing about God, and that's not what I wanna do." So, um, that's how I found that documentary.
Oh,
Because,
okay.
yeah, I was just wanting to just be really pure in my worship. Um, so For people who tell me, "You are never a real Christian," I'm like, "Okay, well, first of all, that's such a straw man."
Yeah, straw man,
Yeah.
it's dismissive, it's like, "I can't think anymore, this is making me uncomfortable, I
Yeah.
have to just dismiss your whole story."
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, and I'm like, "No, if you had any idea," but
Mhm.
whatever, if that makes you feel better,
I
you can
know,
tell
there
me
yeah,
that.
there you go.
Yeah, but I'm like, "No, if you had any idea, like, I dedicated everything to finding out who God was, and that's all I ever wanted to do, and it led me here in the end."
Yes, that I can empathize with that. The listeners of the podcast have heard bits and pieces of my story over and
Mhm.
over. But he realized he could no longer believe. He didn't choose to stop believing. Like he just realized I cannot. His thing was I can't worship the God of the Bible. All the stuff I've been told is true. Like I just
Mhm.
can't square it with reality
No.
anymore. And that burst my little bubble because it's like, okay, well now, well, A, we're Calvinist. He
Yeah.
can't lose his salvation, but I know he had always been a Christian, so that I'm having to figure that out.
Yeah.
And so I needed to make it make sense. So then
Mhm.
I go on my own journey trying to figure out like what do I believe? What do I
Yeah.
think is true? And it led me to now I'm an atheist. Like I don't
Yeah.
believe there are supernatural things. And
No.
all of it was just all of it was in my head. I was
Yeah.
telling some people last night, like my daily life is almost exactly the same as it was when I was a Christian, but my brain is so much more quiet.
Yes.
Yes, the anxiety, I didn't have as much. No, I did have a lot of what I thought was demonic oppression.
Mhm.
When there are lots of rules to break, you're
Mhm.
constantly worried about you're breaking the rules.
Exactly.
So yeah, I can empathize with being like, I was trying to be the best. I was trying to bring my husband back to Jesus. I was trying to like explore more parts of Christianity. I had friends who had come out of charismatic churches, so I was trying to like learn from them, Seventh Day Adventists, and I was like,
Mhm.
oh, this is so great. And then slowly I started mine went through like Catholicism to then learning
Okay.
more Buddhism to then realizing like actually all this stuff is much more helpful than all the things I was doing, and then by 2019, the end of 2019, I was like, yeah, I think it's all made up. And
Yeah.
and people will say, oh, it must have been just head knowledge. And I'm like,
Mhm.
if you saw the Tupperware full of journals, you would know this was not head knowledge.
Yeah. No.
So you spent 2021. What's happened since then? What's happened since then?
I know it's been it 2021 was not that long ago.
Yeah.
But, like, thinking back, I really feel like the deconstruction did begin in 2019, even
Mm.
though I did like, without realizing it, I kinda gave it that last hurrah in 2019, finding that, reformed church, um, and then, yeah, it was the fall of 2021, um, and it was like I know people say it's like, okay, it's not like you wake up one day and you're like, "Okay, I no longer believe," but it was a pretty short time period from, um, the doubting again, 'cause it would come around every year or so, I would feel these doubts, but from the time it started again to the time I was like, "Nope, this is all made up," it was about 2 months
Oh,
from
wow.
yeah, and, uh but I had felt for a long time, this is just so ridiculous. Because when I would break it down in my head and I would sometimes listen to it, like even to sermons, I would listen to them like I wasn't a Christian. I would listen to them like I was someone else hearing them for the first time, and I'd be like, "This sounds like a fairy tale. This sounds very ridiculous. I don't know if I would believe this if I wasn't raised in it."
Yeah.
And yeah, so there were just little things, especially in the Old Testament, that um, once I realized or discovered that like the story of Noah's Ark, because I was also told, probably like you as a Calvinist, the Bible is infallible, it's inerrant, you can trust it. There's nothing in it that is not true. And so I believed every word of it. I believed every story, that you could take it as history, um, very gullibly, unfortunately. But I didn't really have any reason to question those things, right?
Yeah. It's taught to you as though it really happened.
Yeah. So once I heard that the Noah's Ark myth
Hmm.
was in other mythologies that predated it, um, that's when it was just like, holy cow. Like,
Wow. Yeah.
what? And that to me is a very interesting thing, that I even believe that that was true, because I was also kind of told that I was a young earth creationist. So the fact that I even was like, even though that didn't square up totally, because I still I had a big question mark over it. Um, I kind of sort of subscribed to it, but I still had a lot of questions over the whole six. I was like, I don't know how that works, but sure. Um, but then hearing this predated, and it was in like the Epic of Gilgamesh,
Yes.
and then hearing, there's a lot of different cultures around the world that have a flood myth to them, and they all have a similar, like, they all have a similar vein of like the gods were angry and they saved one family and everyone. And I was like, okay, if that story if that story is not true, that means none of this is true, and I can't trust anything written in it. And that was kind of that moment for me of, if one thing is a lie, then it's all a lie. And because that's just, I don't know, you can't be like, okay, well, just this one thing is a lie, when you're told it's infallible, the entire thing. So from there, that was sort of my like, okay, go for it. You have,
Mhm.
like, I gave myself permission to just go for it. And then what I was saying earlier about my husband and uh, deconstructing hell was this quote that he told me when I was just like, I'm really afraid of going to hell. I'm afraid of sinning. Is he saw this quote on Twitter a couple days prior to this conversation we had, and it said, "Life is a spark between two identical eternities, the one before birth and the one after death." And it was this, like this weight on my shoulders just like left, because I thought, oh my goodness, before I was born was an entire eternity, and I have no concept of what that even was. There was no, like, I wasn't in a paradise. I wasn't burning in a lake of fire. There was literally nothing. So I thought, why wouldn't it be the exact same?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I feel like, after living my whole life being so afraid of like, oh, I really don't want to go to hell, it was just gone from that quote. And I was like, thank you so much for sharing that with me. Oh my gosh, you have no idea. Like, I just thanked him and thanked him. And he's like, you're welcome. Cause he didn't believe in it. But I was just like, you have no idea what you just did for me. And he's like, okay, that's no problem. Like, can you please send me that? Can you, like, wherever it was, can you send me that? I need, and so I kept it on my phone as my background screensaver, because I just needed to look at it and remind myself. I kept it on for like 3 or 4 months, and just every time I looked at my phone, I was like, you can question everything. There's no hell. It's just like before you were born.
That is awesome.
Between that and finding out about the Noah's Ark myth, um, and just, I was like, okay, I think I'm pretty much out. And from there, I just find everything I learned so fascinating. everyone I listen to who has been in the same situation. And I started seeking out stories like this of other people giving their accounts, because the next thing I wanted to do was know who has been in this situation. Have there been other people? And were they feeling the same way that I'm feeling? And so I started just connecting without them knowing, just listening and just wanting to know, okay, who else has gone through this? Because I didn't really know if there was other people. Well, obviously there were, but it's not something you hear about when you're in the church at all,
Mm-mm.
at all. And so to find out there's like this big, huge, amazing community of people that are just like, once you know someone that's gone through it, it's like you have this connection instantly. And it's like, you get what I'm going through. You know what I'm going through. You know the words that I'm saying, these
Yes.
buzzwords. And it's just like, it's so amazing. So that's why, like, I love sharing this, because if if I can help people, if people connect with me, it's like awesome. I'll be your friend, because you do lose people too in the
Yes.
process, and it's hard. So
Yes, I've heard that often people stop believing long before they leave the church, simply because you know you're going to leave your community. You're going
yeah,
to be alone. And it is very necessary for the church. Well, I don't know that they can do it
mhm,
anymore, but used to make it feel like there isn't going to be community if you leave. There's no
no,
other place you can get this. Now, people know there are so many places that I can get the needs met that I
yeah,
used to get from church.
hmm,
Now I know there are so many other places that I can get those. Thinking back to the anxiety conversation, mental health help.
yes,
Like, the church does not corner the market on your spiritual warfare.
no,
It's like, this is all BS. I can go therapy, embodied therapy. I mean, you can find so many different places to get the help and the community that you need. And it does not have to be in church anymore.
no. I don't think they really have any idea,
Hmm.
unless they are, a licensed professional. They don't know how to handle mental health at all. And I used to think, okay, I should only talk to Christians for counseling, but that's not even true, because they're only gonna, point you in one direction for everything. So, no, step outside that.
So here you are now. How do
Mhm.
you find community? How have you been able to connect with people? Have you in real life? Because I have not in real life. I'll tell you that. There's a
uh,
few, but
no, I have not.
Mhm.
Um, because we have moved away from, but even then, um, my whole my whole community was
We're
Christian.
Christians. Mhm.
Christians. And other than my in-laws, I, on my husband's family, they aren't necessarily Christians, um, but they live where we used to live, so we don't see them often, unfortunately. They would have been the only people that I still would have had, and they've rallied around me for sure. Um, but I don't have any in-person connections besides my husband, my kids, and my amazing mom,
Aw.
who, yeah, and that's plenty for me right now. Like, it's amazing, but other ways of finding community is online has been the most powerful resource. If you're not sure of where to start online, there's YouTube shows are amazing. There's a lot of live YouTube shows that you can watch throughout the week, and
Oh, wow. I didn't
there's
know
a
that.
there's a lot. And I watch, I don't watch them all, but if I'm doing dishes or something, or cooking dinner, I'll tune them on, and then there's the live chats, and so you get to know people that way. And there's also, I was just on recovering from religion their Zoom meeting last
Yeah.
Monday night. I didn't even know about that until I was on their show, and they do like a weekly Zoom meeting, and it's uh, amazing because it's like a group therapy in a way. They have a guest speaker,
Uh-huh.
and I was their guest speaker, but then you can ask questions to the speaker at the end of the show, and you can have your camera on and you can see the people that are there, and that was really awesome. Um, and then of course, there's just, you can connect on Instagram and TikTok, and there's just so many ways to get to know people who have gone through the same thing. And so I've really utilized that and connected with people and made some really good online connections. And so when I do, I also host a weekly YouTube show, and
Okay.
that's been a lot of fun, and getting different guests on as well. And yeah, so it's been a really uh, fulfilling journey, and one that I wasn't expecting to to
Yeah.
take and then have it go this route. But um, yeah, so I find just online has been huge.
Mhm.
And then if you are in the States, I am not, but they do have conferences throughout the year in different locations. So depending on where you live, you can also just go and meet different people at
Mhm.
conferences. And I would love to attend one at some point, but you can, if you are familiar with different YouTube shows or different activists through social media, a lot of them attend. And but you can either meet them, but also other people who are there just to attend and make those connections. So
We have not, the Graceful Atheist podcast, we have not had in real life meetup things yet.
mhm.
But there are some people in the Deconversion Anonymous Facebook group who all live in North Carolina. And so they
Oh,
just set up
nice.
their own thing and they all met and hung out and ate. And I was so jealous. I'm in Georgia. I was like, oh, it's only 8 hours away.
Oh.
But yeah, people, it's just like building the online friendships,
Mhm.
and then you get to meet people that you can meet in real life. And then,
Yeah,
like you said, the conferences, like they're just, we live in a time where geography no longer, I guess, like prohibits us from
yeah,
building, yeah, community.
yeah,
I have friends that I talk to so consistently, and like we haven't met in real life yet, but
yeah.
like they are true good friends. They
Oh,
really, really,
absolutely.
really are. Wow, I really enjoyed this. Is there
Yeah.
anything, Stacie, that I have not asked that you want to talk more about?
I just think that if anyone out there who listens to these types of shows, and if you're just listening because you either are skeptical of people's stories or you're questioning yourself, don't be afraid to
Mhm.
continue exploring those doubts. And I also think, um, don't go. This is just my own advice that I did for myself. Don't go to your pastor. I think go to someone else who's neutral, or because they're just going to steer you back to what they want you to believe. Um, I purposely didn't, when I started having doubts, I didn't want to talk to our pastor because I thought he's just going to tell me what he wants me to know.
Mhm.
And that's not what I want.
It's the same stuff we've heard over and over and
Exactly.
over. Yeah.
Exactly. I already knew the resources he was going to give. But
Mhm.
don't be afraid to ask the questions. You're not doing anything wrong. Um, there is no such thing as blasphemy of the Holy Spirit or the unpardonable sin. That's just a way to control you into uh, submission. And I heard it was either Seth Andrews, or I think it was Seth Andrews, but
Mhm.
he did a really good kind of blurb on that I recorded, and I'm going to share it on my Instagram. But yeah, it's a way that the church has controlled people, is just putting up this like, no, you don't even know what that is. Everyone is kind of in question. What is blasphemy of the Holy Spirit? It's this invisible thing that you're just afraid of.
Yes, it's this vague enough, well, vague, but, like, scary enough. It is a Bible verse, Jesus said it, so, like, somehow
Yeah,
it has power.
exactly.
There's a former guest named Lars who he often talks about how Christians, and, we were one of them
Oh
at
yeah, of course.
how believe that, like, words are just magic. Like, if you
Mhm.
just say these words, or if you've read these words, or if they're written out, somehow there's magical power that will
Yes.
harm you or benefit, however. And yeah, so it's like if Jesus said it and it's written down, even if I have no idea what that means,
Yeah.
then I
That's
need to
so
take it
true.
seriously.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you don't. And yeah, so don't let just because they're written down in this book bound by leather called the Holy Bible, it's who cares?
Mhm.
And another thing that I really realized when I started really looking at some of these stories in the Bible is they're really grotesque. And there's a reason why you're not told to turn to them on a Sunday morning. You know, I we're always told, "Let's turn to this," and it's the same ones over and over again. You're not told to turn to the ones where, the guy throws his daughter out to get raped
Mhm.
continuously, and then she's chopped up and sent to the 12 tribes of Israel. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
you're
yeah.
not told because if someone brings a guest and they're like, "What the actual what are you talking about?" So, just yeah, just it's not this holy magical book. It's
Mm-mm.
it's literally an old fable.
Mhm. There's some cool stories, like, my boys and I like some of the cool stories. Of course, they're like they always, well, my older one, he was fo I don't remember how old he was when we realized that we couldn't believe anymore, but he was old enough that, like, he had just kind of learned to read,
Mhm.
and he would read his little Jesus storybook Bible because we were good Calvinists.
Yes, we had that too.
And, and then we would read the real Bible, the grown-up
Mhm.
Bible, and
Yeah.
he was like, "Wait, I didn't know David cut off Goliath's head. Like, why'd I get to miss that?" Like, because he's a little kid, thinks this is so
Yeah.
cute, you know? And
Yeah.
now it's nice because we can read those, like, myths, although
Mhm.
there aren't a lot of children book myths of those stories, but
No.
we can also read Greek stories and Roman
Mhm.
and Norse mythology, and we can just and indigenous peoples, and just
Yeah,
enjoy the stories for
yeah,
their coolness factor
that's true.
without, and I don't have to be afraid of them. I don't have to worry that it's gonna lead my kids astray. We can just
We can
enjoy,
just read them
yeah,
for
epic
the
poems and
yeah,
stuff, and then and just go on with our lives, and it's fun.
exactly.
Oh,
Yeah, that was one thing I felt with my kids. It was always like, "No, don't look over here. No, don't look over here.
mhm.
No, 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 no." It was just this constant, like, I
Yes.
have to keep you focused and looking at only this, and that was a lot of stress too.
I didn't realize, and that my older son, again, when I did, because we're a homeschool
Mhm,
family, and,
mhm.
at one point, I guess this was in 2019. Yes, it was in 2019. I was like, "I don't wanna do Bible story. I don't wanna read this right now, like, I don't even know if I believe it," and he was like, "Okay, that's fine." He has no, like, baggage. He was just like,
Yeah,
"Sure, whatever,"
yeah,
and he's also like, "Sweet, another thing we don't have to do for school," like, it was great.
yeah.
But whenever I finally was like, "Baby, I think it's all made up. I don't think it's true." He goes, "So I don't have to believe in the Noah story?" And I was like, "No. Why?" And he was like, "I didn't like all the animals dying and all the people getting left." So this
Oh,
whole time he had this little, like, thing he didn't love that he had to
it
believe because
bothered
it was
him,
supposed to
yeah.
be true, that, and then I think it was the next Christmas, he goes, "Oh, and I don't have to believe that King Herod killed all those babies?" I was like, "Nope, pretty sure it's made
Oh,
up story." Like, all these things I had no idea he
yeah,
was tucking away. Now,
sure.
he did like that David killed Goliath by cutting
Yeah,
his head off. Totally dug that part,
that's a
but all
boy
the other stuff,
story.
yeah. Yeah, well, he's like,
Yeah.
"I'll keep that one." But,
Aw,
you just don't know how, like,
yeah. How it affects them.
how it affects our kids.
Totally.
Yeah,
Wow, that's very profound.
kids are great.
They are. They are.
do you have any recommendations, podcasts, books, anything that helped you on your journey, or that you're reading now that have been, or listening to now?
Yeah. You know what, I always like to recommend Seth Andrews, The
Mm-hmm.
Thinking Atheist. I think he comes across just so kind and compassionate in everything he says. He grew up a Christian as well, and
Mm-hmm.
he deconverted. Actually, I think he was around the same age I was, and so his book was the first book that I read, and it's called Deconverted. I was just looking for books at the library. Again, just has anyone else written about this? Has anyone
Yes.
gone through this? And I found his book, had no clue who he was, had no clue he had a podcast, nothing. I just wanted to read a story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I came across his, and it was just captivating. And I love his show. So, The Thinking Atheist on YouTube, and he's fantastic. He's so kind. Um, and I listened to even shows of his from 10, 12 years ago. They're still relevant, and
Mm-hmm.
they've helped in my journey. And yeah, there's so many different people that you can just look up their names on YouTube. Dave Warnock, his book, I just finished reading a memoir called
Yeah.
Childish Things, and he's another amazing person that I admire. He's become kind of a friend too. He's so kind, and yeah, just there's a lot of just phenomenal people. And I also like David. I think his name is David Mac. You pronounce it David McAfee. He has some really great books as well. Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist, and he has some really good books for children as well.
Oh, really?
Really good. And I checked them out of the library. David McAfee. A couple about different religions and different gods, and I got those for my oldest son to read.
We actually have, I think we have those. They look like little
You
stick people. I kind of like
kind
stick
of. They're
people,
like
but
cartoony.
they're colored, yeah, and
Yeah.
in cartoons. Yeah, we've read the Belief book,
Okay, I
and
think that's
and we haven't read the second one yet. We've read.
okay.
That's what we do for school now.
Yeah.
Instead
That's
of the
awesome.
Bible. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
just a shout out idea that we did with the book. You get to create your own religion, like make up your own.
Oh, cool.
And
Yeah, I think
so
that's great.
it was fun. What are our followers going to sacrifice? What are some of our rules?
Right.
Where do they worship? What do the temples look like? And it was such a fun thought experiment with the kids. Our whole
Oh,
family did it. It was a lot of fun. And
oh, that's cool.
you have a 7-year-old who's like, pizza, they're sacrificing their pizza, and then I'm like, I want them to be in nature because I love nature.
Yeah.
It's a neat experiment.
Oh,
It's fun.
yeah.
Those are cool books.
Yeah, super cool. So yeah, I recommend those, especially if you have kids and you just kind of want to expose them to just gently, especially if you're deconverting and you've exposed them to religion.
Yes.
It's a nice way of sort of like, here, here's some information for you, especially, 'cause my son, he's 10 and my oldest. And so he really enjoyed them. Um, when he read the first one, he was like, "Can you give me the second one?" I was like, "Yeah,
That's
it's on
awesome.
hold. I'm waiting to pick it up at the library." So, yeah, those are some good ones. And I'm actually really thankful that I've had the opportunity to just chat with Dave Warnock and David McAfee on our show. And Seth Andrews, I get to chat with him next week. So,
That's
um,
exciting.
very
Wow.
exciting.
Yeah.
So, yeah, um, but they are some of my favorites, not just because I've talked to them. It's just they're wonderful people. So,
That's great.
yeah.
Well, we will put all of these in the show notes so
Okay.
that people can just
Thank
click
you.
and find things.
Yeah.
How can our listeners connect with you online?
Oh, sure. Well, you can follow me on Instagram, add me on Facebook, follow me on TikTok or Twitter. So my
So
screen
clever.
name,
So clever. I love
thank
it.
you. My screen name is Apostacie, but it's my name. So Tacie.
I love it. I
Thank
love
you.
it.
And then I'm also, yeah, like I said, a co-host on Secular Soapbox once a week. So if you search Skeptic Haven on YouTube, that's the network, and we have a bunch of different shows. And I co-host Secular Soapbox with Michael Wiseman. So
Okay,
yeah,
very cool. Well, Stacie, thank you so much for this. This was a lot of fun.
thank you.
I really enjoyed hearing your
Yeah,
story.
thank you. I really enjoyed meeting you and sharing my story. So thanks for having me.
My final thoughts on the episode. That was just simply lovely. Oh, I enjoyed that so much. Stacie is so kind and so thoughtful in everything that she said. I loved it. It was such a wonderful conversation. Seeing other people seeking after truth. She wanted to know, are these things true? That was so important to her. And so she pursued that knowledge and eventually had to stop keeping herself from moving forward with questions and being too afraid of what those answers might be. And when she did that, it led so many places she didn't expect, but to the word she used, fulfilling, to a fulfilling life. And I just love it. It's wonderful. It's so inspiring. Oof, I don't know how to use non-Christian-y type language, but it is. It's inspiring to see people doing that. I very much empathized with what she talked about when it came to the anxiety. It is amazing and sad how much anxiety, how much our brains are just constant, and our bodies are constantly concerned about so many things when you are a religious person. Are you glorifying God? You're not glorifying God. Well, maybe I am. Or is that the devil? Or is this my flesh? Or is this, it's just constant, constant, constant. And how, when you leave that, it's not necessarily immediate, but like slowly your brain and hopefully also your body can slow down and calm down, live in the present, enjoy the life that you have, do the things that need to be done without all that added anxiety and worry and it's just so much. So, yes, Stacie, thank you so much for being on the podcast. This was just a lovely, lovely conversation.
The Secular Grace thought of the week is my two favorite words: error correction. Stacie's story reminded me again that the brittleness of, in particular, the doctrine of inerrancy, but dogmatic doctrine in general, and the brittleness of any ideology that cannot be questioned. The reason there are droves of people deconstructing and leaving the church is that there is no subtlety allowed, no nuance allowed, no doubt allowed. And when one begins to doubt even a tiny little thing, a small doctrine, the house of cards begins to come down. Both Stacie and an upcoming guest named Stephanie really remind me of the opposite of this, of the investigating, of the finding of truth, the comfort of resting in evidence. The scientific method is not about believing in science. It's about the process. The process is not believing things that don't have sufficient evidence and being skeptical. And keep in mind here, I don't mean cynical. I mean skeptical. Show me the evidence. And that applies to so many areas of our lives, not just religion, but the onslaught of advertising that we are put under on a daily basis. Even bad science, the medical claims that come out all the time about this diet or that fad, more coffee, less coffee, more drinking alcohol, less drinking alcohol, all those things tend to be bad examples of science. But the better the example of science that it is, the more double-blind the testing, the number of people who have been in the study, the longer it has gone on, the more you can trust that. And the irony of coming out of Christianity is that we are told we can trust, that we can rest in Jesus, in the dogma. And the truth is, as we come out of that, when we start doubting that and we can no longer trust it, we can rest in things that have evidence. We can rest in the process of the scientific method. We can rest in things that we can be critical of and still stand after that criticism. I'm very excited. Next week is my interview with Jennifer Michael Hecht and her book, The Wonder Paradox. It's an amazing book. Please go check that out. That will be released in early March. The week after that, we have our 4-year anniversary. Officially, March 14th is the anniversary of the podcast. And I have Arlene, Mike T, Jimmy, Daniel, and Colin on to talk about our favorite movies, books, podcasts that talk about deconversion or secular grace in one way or another. I also want to hint at, I'm in negotiations right now to do a crossover promo and have Holly from the Mega podcast on to interview. I'm super excited about that. I hope that comes to fruition. That will be in early April if it happens. Until then, my name is David, and I am trying to be the graceful atheist. Join me and be graceful human beings. The beat is called Waves by Mackay Beats. If you want to get in touch with me to be a guest on the show, email me at gracefulatheist@gmail.com. For blog posts, quotes, recommendations, and full episode transcripts, head over to gracefulatheist.com. This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast, a part of the Atheist United Studios podcast network.